I'm back again. Let me thank you if you're watching this. I'm going to talk about science. Science is very important, and you don't have, I'm not a science nerd, but I base a whole lot of things on science. I consider science. I care about science. I'm look at a lot of stuff related to science and the practical things of science. Uh, Science has been used forever. We come up with these modern words. I thought about doing a video about how we have all these modern words that are somehow are unique words. They're not. They're words. It's like it's sort of like the color crayon sets. Remember when you were a kid, you had about 10 or 12 colors, right? Blue and orange, yellow, and now you have what nightingale blue, uh, uh, St. Augustine green or whatever, right? I mean, it's they're just they're just words to describe something. Maybe in some detail, maybe not. Maybe St. Augustine green is the same thing as green was 50 years ago, but now they call it St. Augustine. Anyway, so we keep coming up with language, new languages, and so science it's not new. Think about this. I looked up, and we'll take a look at this. Looked up when they came up with the sheep. Now, the sheep, right? Sheep wool is ancient, right? We've been doing sheep wool forever. At least 6,000 years with these, with big woolly sheep. There's an article that was done, a study done. I just picked this up out from science.org. And Daly et al. Sequenced 118 ancient genomes from Eurasian domestic and wild sheep samples spanning the past 12,000 years. And they've come to doing that, they came to the conclusion that probably our modern sheep comes from the Turkish area, Neolithic Turkish areas of Neolithic time, Turkish area around Turkey. Then we have the another Wikipedia states that the wild mouflon is a sheep-like animal. It's not a very woolly kind of animal. It's got long, thin legs. Doesn't look a lot like our modern sheep if you go and look for it. But that came out of probably these are wild creatures throughout Europe and Asia, and they probably domesticated them in Iran or whatnot. So now the point I'm trying to make here, though, is how do you think they came up with the woolly sheep? They didn't start with the woolly sheep. They did observation. They did trial and error. Hey, what do you know? Science, right? Somebody had a theory that, I wonder if I take that sheep and that sheep and that sheep and sort of set them aside and breed them together. I wonder if I can get that color or that much wool or whatever. Somebody had that theory, but it was just a theory. And then they actually went through experimenting, and they came up with what we know as modern sheep. Now, we have all kind of science today, and this is the thing that aggravates me, is we have all kind of stuff today that is just scientific theory. And in fact, what's remarkable is how often scientific theory that has been disproven by good scientific method continues to be thrown out as if it's, hey, Albert Einstein said X, Y, Z. Well, yes, he did. And they've, at another point, they've decided that what Albert Einstein was talking about doesn't make good sense anymore because we found out something else, or they did some other studies or whatever. And that's true. I just don't remember off the top of my head specifically what theory I'm talking that was one of Einstein's theory. That doesn't mean that Einstein didn't do a lot of good science. It only means that every theory that he threw out there wasn't a scientific fact. It was just a scientific theory. It was scientific. That is, you had a scientist think about things that scientists think about, but it was just a theory. It wasn't proven science. And this happens all the time. So now, please like this video. If you're gonna get, but watch it to the end. If you get anything out of it, like it. It's a, I know. Look, I'm not trying to be an influencer like these people who are trying to make their living being an influencer. But my goal is simply to share stuff that I hope edifies you, that will broaden your scope of thought, or introduce, and I don't mean that you're an idiot or can't think for yourself. I mean that maybe you just haven't thought about it, or here's another way of thinking about it, or whatever. Maybe the people around you don't talk about this particular kind of thing, and so, hey, this is something to consider. That's my purpose, but it's a little bit frustrating. I did a video several weeks ago, a month or two ago. I thought about just stopping because I was reaching so few people. And then about 2 weeks ago, I did a video on about, hey, it's time to invest in crypto. That was the name of it. Well, that must have been the buzzwords, the keywords that mattered to somebody. I had 153 views on that. Now, at the same time, a week ago, I put out a video. I had 2 views on it. I put out a video a couple of days ago. I've had 8 views on it so far, okay? So maybe you'd like to go see some more of my videos. Go ahead and do that if you please. But at least like this one. Follow me. That'd be all great if you think that I'm not just a lunatic. And I might occasionally say something that might be, positive for you to think about. Anyway, back to the topic. I'm talking about science because, and I'm saying to you, hey, I base a lot of what I think on science. Now, I also base a lot of what I think on the Gospels. But one does not denounce, knock the other one out. And this is why I keep telling people on occasion, look, if you want to see some people talk about science, go look at these people who are on Genesis, whatever. Anyway, they're Genesis kind of creation kind of science channels, and you will see people talking about real science, and they're not throwing out all the science. They're not denouncing everything, and they also will point out all the people who have been scientists over the centuries who have also been people of faith. So one doesn't negate the other. But I think scientists is really interesting, and so I watched different things, and a couple of things is the reason I'm talking about this today is that I've watched a couple of things here recently. I've seen a lot of videos by a guy named Stefan Burns. He is a geophysicist. I think his worldview is a little bit more Eastern than my worldview, but as far as the science that he talks about, Eastern, maybe another word would be New Apostolic or Aquarian kind of. He's got some of those kind of ideas, but when he's talking about pure science, it's interesting. He's talking about, hey, the sun is putting out all this plasma, etc., and when it's putting it out, and look how it seems to be having effects on the solar system or on the Earth, on you. He brings up that guy. It's interesting. His videos are about a half hour long or something. I normally only watch the first 5 minutes or so to sort of see what is he there, because he's telling me this is what happened the last 24 hours. This is what happened the last couple of months, and it's different than we've ever seen. Now, of course, there's always going to probably be a lot of different than you've ever seen when your science is no older than geophysics, right? I mean, how much do they know about what about the measuring instruments? These are all pretty new, recent kind of things that they use. So they haven't been measuring the sun output and sunspots and stuff like that for the last 500 years, maybe for 50 years, right? So, and this is true of our weather. You know, people talk about, a lot of the whole global warming nonsense and everything. Look, we've only been measuring weather for about 100 years or so. That's not for the Earth. That's not very long. Now we have all these other techniques like going and checking out ice cores and things like that to get some concept, some idea about ice ages and things like that. But as far as just the temperature, so when your local weather channel says, "Hey, we have a historic high," well, guess what? It's historic for the last 100 years, and maybe less than that, because maybe where you're at, they didn't. Maybe your community used to be a hayfield, right? Nobody was doing the weather, measuring the temperature, 100 years ago. So, anyway, this is important to keep in mind that all our science a lot of it is new. And a lot of it, once again, is things that are not new, but just things that we're applying new words to. Okay? Similar processes were done. You can go back and study the ancient Greeks and the Egyptians and etc. And there's all kind of stuff that they did that is just, we didn't think they could do it. Of course, our whole mindset here in the last 50 to 100 years has been, well, people who came before us were Neanderthals, and up into, and so people have just slowly evolved to be as brilliant as we are, and we're up here at the top of the pyramid for brilliance, and there's no science to support that. And the more you look at what ancient civilizations did, the more ridiculous it is to think that. But anyway, so I watched Stefan Burns, and there's another one to know what's going on with the sun. It's intriguing. And then there's another one which is on the pulse with Silty or Silly. On the pulse with Silly. I think I did a typo. Sili. I think it was Silky. On the pulse with Silky. Anyway, this is a lady who is a what kind of scientist? Maybe she's a geologist, I guess, or something like that. And she's constantly, at least once, if not 2 or 3 times a week, she's got videos on the air telling you, "Hey, did you just? Oh, I've got to tell you this. Mount Vesuvius is active. It's about to blow. There's people that live all around it. These people need to get the heck away from Mount Vesuvius, but they're not doing it because the officials in the area don't want to get anybody scared, and they're telling everybody everything's good. But these people need to get the heck away from Mount Vesuvius." Or she's telling me about a earthquake somewhere, or multiple earthquakes. There's piles of earthquakes happening around, what's the, Santini? Is that it? The Greek island? Near Cyprus, I think it is, or Crete, one of those. Out there in the Aegean Sea, sort of. It's a big tourist site. There's clustering of these, a lot of earthquakes happening, which means, and there's volcanoes around there, etc. So she talks about mountain slides. That's the first time I really saw it. There's a mountain in fact, a couple in Switzerland. They're just falling apart and sliding down in the valley and crushing villages and creating lakes, and it's intriguing. She's a scientist because that's her work. So she's looking at it every day, 24/7. I'm looking at science, once a week with Silky for a half hour. Okay. I don't know all the details and the deep details. You don't know all the details of doing a landscape architecture plan. That's what I know about. So that doesn't mean you can't have ideas. That doesn't mean, the average person thinks they're a landscape architect when I walk into a room. Everybody's telling me how we ought to do something. Well, everybody's got their own ideas, and that's okay. They just might not have a deeper level of knowledge that I might have on the topic, right? So Silky has more knowledge than me. It's deeper. So Stefan Burns has more knowledge. But hey, I'm watching them for just a little bit, and I'm going, hey, that science is really intriguing and interesting. Something to think about. Tsunamis. Silky's talking about tsunamis. And of course, normally tsunamis are coming after earthquakes or volcanic eruptions, where some island all of a sudden appears in the middle of the ocean, etc. Right? So these people are scientists, and I just like to think about science because I think it's intriguing and worthwhile, as well as I like to think about history. And I guess the long and short of it is I'm a sort of somewhat of a control guy, and I like to know what's going on in the world. Now, this sort of brings me also to things are happening around us. I mean, these crazy things. The sun is happening. There's earthquakes. There's stuff happening. If you are a person, a Judeo-Christian person, you may look at prophecies in Scripture, and you may say, "Hey, looks a lot like what we heard about Jesus talk about, and Paul talk about, and Daniel talk about, etc." But regardless, there will always be these things, frankly. And we've had a lot of stuff. This year has been sort of crazy with the weather. Think about it. I mean, here just the last few weeks, West Virginia had a flooding. San Antonio had major flooding. Just Atlanta yesterday, at the time for this taping yesterday, Atlanta had flooding. And I'm sure many other places had flooding too. But the point is, these are flood. This isn't an everyday flooding. Now, we had flooding with Asheville last September. That's not even a year ago. With that terrible flood, there's floods just happened in Cape Town, South Africa, that were devastating. China, I was watching a video just yesterday about flooding in China. It's just crazy, flooding all over the place. Now, I'm not trying to say that everything is all of a sudden happening, although things do happen in cycles. And it could be that this plasma stuff going on with the sun, we're supposed to be in a Maunder minimum or approaching a Maunder minimum. Look that up, Maunder minimum, Maunder maximum. Do a little study on that, and you'll see that, hey, if this is good science, then we're probably going to have an ice age more likely than we're going to have global warming. So look that up yourself. So these crazy things are happening, and sometimes some of these things are happening because we have ignored good science, or we have not applied good science. And in my opinion, now this is just my opinion, I don't have any scientific data to prove this, but I can look out at my neighbor's yard where they paved their entire front yard. They paved their entire. I drive around my community and I see multiple places where people are parking all over. Sometimes they're putting gravel in their front yard. Sometimes they're paving large sections of their front yard. Sometimes they're just parking 5 vehicles in their front yard. Well, you know what happens when you park 5 vehicles in your front yard? You compact your soil, and it basically becomes concrete. That is, its ability to absorb water isn't too great. And then, of course, people are, okay, we bought the house, now we're going to put in a pool. Well, the pool only accepts so much water, and then it overflows. And so the people are pumping the water out of their pool because it's getting full. And they say, we need a nice deck around our back. Oh, and by the way, we need some more. We need to build a shop in the back of the house and put a 16-foot wide driveway back to my shop. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is we're paving the universe. And if you know anything about codes, whenever you're building a community, building a site anywhere, one of the things the planners are going to hit you up with, not the planners, the engineers on the county or city review committee, is they're going to have you make sure that you are designing for a 100-year storm or whatnot. And this all sounds good. You may think, oh, yeah, well, okay. Oh, you're going to make me raise my house 6 inches because there might be a 100-year storm? I don't want to pay for the dirt to come in and have to add more dirt to my site. That's just more that's just more money I'm having to pay for my house or my business. And so, but tough. The engineers are sure that we've got a code that says 100 years. Well, personally, I think it ought to be for 500-year storms because of all these floods. All these floods all around, and I mean, it's not new. There's a in the metro area that I live in. Other communities in this metro area have had major flooding over the last 10 years or so, 10, 20 years. Major flooding in communities that once did not flood. Well, my point with this is I don't think good science was applied to the planning process because, in my opinion, also, here's another one. People buy a house and then they build on, it used to not have a back porch, and they build on a back porch. They build on an extra room. They build a mother-in-law's apartment on the back of the side. Whatever they may do, all of these things are taking up areas, pervious areas, where water can percolate into the soil, where water can, the grass keeps the water from moving off the site very quickly. It all goes slowly, or much slowly. And it's based on these formulas that I did. I did those formulas when I was in landscape architecture school. I don't get to do that too much because I'm a landscape architect, and the engineers pretty much handle all that in reality. But I can do it. I mean, I know the theories. I could apply them, and I could come up with the same answer that the engineer does. But they base it on, maybe a 50 years storm, 100-year storms were pretty typical. And so that means they're expecting to have, let's say, normally you have, at a given 24-hour period, I'm just saying something hypothetical, a given 24-hour period, you have 2 inches of rain, period, over 24 hours, not over 15 minutes, over 24 hours. And for a 100-year, a normal annual storm. And so a 100-year storm, again, just being hypothetical, I don't have it in front of me, 100-year storm may be that based on having 5 inches over a month, or of course it wouldn't be that way. It'd really be let's back up. Let's say a normal rainfall would be 1 inch over 24 hours, and 50-year would be 2 inches over 24 hours, or 3 inches over 24 hours, and 100 years would be 5 inches over 24 hours. Let's say that. And it's going to depend on where you live, soil types, etc. Okay, so that's why I'm just being purely hypothetical. So, and a 500-year storm is where you have 10 inches over 24 hours. Well, so they plan on 5 inches. Well, the problem is they planned on 5 inches, but they planned on there being a lot more open space than we've ended up having because everything's getting paved, and they're not. The community isn't. You've got 200 houses, 500 houses, 2,000 houses, depending on the development, right? And all of a sudden, these were planned to have, 2/3 of the area was going to be grass or woodland. But over time, now it's only 1/3 is grass and woodland. That means water is running off everywhere, and then we have these floods. So that's why I say we ought to do it a 500-year storm and build up everybody nice and high enough so that, and build our roads high enough, etc., so that we're not having communities flooded out so badly. Now, when you're up in somewhere like the Appalachians and the mountains and places where you have these valleys and vales and things like that, water just comes down those mountains. It's bad news. One thing I decided a good few years ago is I love the mountains, but if I happen to live in the mountains or in a hilly country, I would make sure that I'm going to be, I used to say, I used to think I'm going to make sure I'm like 20, 25 feet above the stream. Wherever the stream is, I'm going to be 20, 25 feet above it. Now I'm thinking I'm going to make sure I'm 50 feet or 75 feet above a stream. Because after watching what happened in North Carolina in particular, that was pretty devastating for people who thought they were well above a stream, and all of a sudden they weren't. Anyway, so, do you remember all of the science that you learned in school? This is why I like to keep up with scientific stuff. I don't remember everything I learned in elementary school or high school, or even college. When I went to graduate school for landscape architecture, there were some things that maybe I paid particular interest to, attention to, because they related very directly to my profession. But there's plenty of stuff that I just didn't deal with. Horticultural stuff, yes. Biological stuff to a degree. Geophysics, no. Geology, yes. But even with geology, it's not like I have to deal with that in a deep way, like a geologist does. It's probable that if I lived in a sand place, right? So if I lived in a rock place or a clay place, then I would get to know something about that geology, right? But where I live, that's not an issue. So it's good to know about scientists. And you don't have to be a scientist to appreciate science. You might be an accountant, you might be a mechanic, you might be a shop owner, or you might work on an assembly line or in a warehouse. Science is still, it affects you, right? You don't have to be a geophysicist or an astrophysicist. In fact, astrophysicist is, to me, so what? I mean, for my everyday life. Look, if a meteor is going to hit the Earth, there ain't nothing we're going to do about it, I don't think. Right? So we're going to have to deal with it when it happens. And there's just so much theory, that gets disproven all the time that I don't have a lot of patience for. I'll watch a little bit of that, but I don't have a lot of patience for listening to some guy talk about it, some using all these words I don't know and talking about theories and things that I got no idea about and frankly have no effect on my life whatever. The science behind how we get a sheep, that affects my life. The science behind the chicken I'm eating or the cow that I'm eating or whatnot, that's more important, especially when we're looking at the science about how they're feeding these things and putting chemicals in them and things that ultimately get into my body, and that might be problematic for my body. So knowing about the science is important. Now, this whole thing about the floods, as I was talking about, though, pops into my head. I thought it'd be good to talk about just for a moment. Merriam-Webster's definition for uniformitarianism. In fact, I just realized I really didn't talk about the video that I first thought about. But so I'll just quickly, let's look at Merriam-Webster's definition for uniformitarianism. A geologic doctrine that processes acting in the same manner as at present and over long spans of time are sufficient to account for all geological features and all past changes. Well, this is getting proved to be not a very good theory. Catastrophism is probably a more logical thing when you look at how things. And I did a video talking about something about this a little bit about a month ago. I talked about the little Grand Canyon in South Georgia. I think I talked about the East African Rift, where there's a fissure going down the east side of Africa that apparently, the way it's headed, there's going to be another piece. There's going to be East Africa, the island of East Africa in some time. But anyway, this video that's down at the bottom, you should take a look at it. It's about a half hour long. Scientists issue red alert after a satellite detects sudden uplift in Appalachian mountains. Now, we didn't think Appalachian mountains were doing any more moving, did we? They were old, ancient mountains that just sitting there. And so they used a GOAZ satellite, I believe. You can look it up, look at it and things yourself. But what they found is, hey, there's something's going on down there underneath things. And the video talks about the different theories for what it may be. It's interesting that this is being brought up at the same time that we're getting hit with all these pulses from the sun, etc. I'm not sure when this is a new video, so I don't know whether, is this something they just found out last week or a year ago or when? If it was just last week, that would, maybe there's some correlation there, some correlation between the Appalachian Mountains rising and the all these volcanoes and earthquakes and the solar plasma hitting the earth, etc. That's interesting. I'm not saying it is. I'm not sure. But things are not static. See, the uniformitarianism would assume probably that the Appalachian Mountains should be shrinking and not growing, because that's the way things have worked, that they've seen over a period of time. So look at this yourself and think about it. Now, the thing sort of talks in the narrator talks in ways that, hey, this can affect farming and everything. Well, look, if the mountain is growing by 1 inch in the last 5 years, I don't think that's going to affect your farming or stuff like that. But it does talk about the impact of how changes in the geology of the earth can change what grows, the invasive plants and other species. It can have an impact. Interesting. So, be a scientist. If you're not a real professional scientist, don't worry about it. But think science, because there's things to know about modern medicine. There's a lot of stuff in our medicines and our foods that, if you look at the science, it is not good stuff. So we need to know about that kind of stuff and not just let somebody sell it to us on an app and tell us, you are worth it. Yes, you deserve this ice cream. You deserve this pill. You deserve this taco. Okay? And it's good for you. 51% of physicians say smoking is good or whatever. Remember the old commercial? That was out in the 50s with the data that physicians said it was, hey, smoking's good. We decided that wasn't right, did we? Anyway, I like science because I'm looking for the truth. If you want to look for the truth, if the truth matters to you, if all you want is the truth, no matter what it brings you, because who needs to live on a lie? I think you just ought to pray to your Creator and say, let me know what the truth is. I don't care what it is. I want the truth. And I believe that you'll find it.